What if a single moment of injustice could spark a movement that changes countless lives? For Elliot Marshall, a torn ticket at an airport gate became just that moment. Humiliated by an act of blatant bias, Elliot's life took an unexpected turn when a stranger spoke up, setting off a chain reaction of resilience, redemption, and transformation. But this isn't just a story about overcoming challenges, it's about what happens when people choose to stand together. From a young woman's courageous intervention to the unexpected redemption of someone who caused him harm, Elliot's journey unfolds with twists and turns that reveal the power of kindness and the potential for growth in us all. What started as a personal battle quickly grew into something far greater. The Bridge Initiative, a program that transforms not only the lives of its participants, but also the communities around them. Through moments of triumph, tension, and hope, Elliot discovers that even the smallest ripples can create waves of lasting change. Elliot Marshall moved through the bustling terminal of Denver International Airport with the quiet confidence of someone who had fought for his place in the world. At 56, he had built a successful career as the CEO of Marshall Tech, a tech solutions company that had grown from a small startup into a nationally recognized brand. He was on his way to Seattle for a critical meeting that could expand the company's reach, but as he approached the gate, his mind wasn't on the deal. It was on the memories of where he had started a janitor's son, scrubbing floors in his father's modest hardware store after school. The terminal buzzed with the usual symphony of activity, rolling suitcases, scattered conversations, and the muffled announcements echoing through the cavernous space. Elliot, dressed simply in a crisp navy polo shirt and tailored slacks, exuded a quiet composure. His success had been hard-won, and he carried it with grace, but he also knew that appearances could deceive. Experience had taught him that no matter how far he climbed, some people would always see him as out of place. At Gate 32, a young woman in a pressed airline uniform stood behind the counter. Her name tag read Emily Carson. Her sharp features and stiff posture gave the impression of someone who took her job seriously, perhaps too seriously. Elliot stepped forward and handed over his first-class ticket, his expression neutral, his movements practiced from years of business travel. Emily glanced at him briefly, her eyes narrowing. She took the ticket, scanning it before looking back at him. "This line is for first-class passengers," she said curtly. Elliot nodded, keeping his voice calm. "I know." Her skepticism was subtle but clear as she examined him more closely, her fingers tightening around the ticket. Then, with a sudden motion that stunned even Elliot, she tore the ticket in two. "This must be a mistake," she said, her tone laced with finality. The sound of the tearing paper seemed louder than it should have been. For a moment, everything else in the terminal faded into the background. Elliot blinked, his mind racing to process what had just happened. Around him, murmurs began to rise from the other passengers. Some watched with wide eyes, while others glanced away, pretending not to notice. "Excuse me?" Elliot said, his voice steady despite the heat rising in his chest. "Why did you do that?" Emily straightened, her expression unflinching. "You don't belong here," she said simply. Her words, though quiet, carried a weight that struck Elliot like a blow. He had faced bias before, subtle and overt, but this felt different, brazen, humiliating. Still, he refused to let anger control him. Years of experience had taught him that dignity was his best weapon. "I would like to speak with your supervisor," Elliot said, his tone firm but measured. Emily hesitated, her confidence faltering slightly as the murmurs around them grew louder. Nearby, a woman in her 20s stepped forward, phone in hand. She had been watching the exchange intently, and now she raised her voice. "Why did you tear his ticket?" she asked, her tone sharp. The question cut through the air, drawing even more attention. Emily's smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Before she could respond, a man in a polished suit arrived. His name tag identified him as James Lindley, the gate supervisor. His expression was a mixture of confusion and concern. "What seems to be the problem here?" James asked, his gaze shifting between Elliot and Emily. Elliot held up the torn ticket. "This is the problem," he said, his voice even. "I had a first-class ticket, and she destroyed it." James's face darkened as he turned to Emily. "Is this true?" Emily stammered, her earlier bravado crumbling under the scrutiny. "I thought I assumed—" James raised a hand, cutting her off. "We will deal with this later," he said firmly. Turning back to Elliot, his tone softened. "I deeply apologize, sir. Let me issue you a new ticket immediately." Elliot nodded, remaining silent as James typed furiously into the computer. Around them, the murmurs from the passengers had grown louder, and a few people were recording the scene on their phones. The young woman with the phone, her name, Elliot would later learn, was Abby Taylor, stepped closer. "This isn't right," she said, her voice carrying a note of defiance. "You can't treat people like this." James glanced at her briefly, but said nothing, handing Elliot a freshly printed ticket. "Please follow me, sir," he said, motioning toward the jet bridge. "We'll make sure you're comfortable on the flight." Elliot followed James without a word, his steps measured, his expression calm. But inside, he felt the familiar ache of weariness. This wasn't the first time he had been questioned, dismissed, or excluded. It was a script he knew too well, but that didn't make it any easier to endure. The first-class cabin was a quiet contrast to the chaos at the gate. Elliot settled into his seat, his movements deliberate. He noticed the torn ticket still in his hand, its jagged edges a sharp reminder of what had just happened. He folded it carefully and placed it in his pocket, unsure why he was holding onto it, but unable to let it go. A flight attendant approached, her smile tight and professional. "Would you like something to drink, sir?" she asked. "No, thank you," Elliot replied evenly. As she moved on, Elliot turned his gaze to the window, watching the ground crew prepare the plane for takeoff. His thoughts were a jumble of frustration, disbelief, and a quiet determination not to let the incident define his day. But the murmurs, the stares, and the weight of what had just happened clung to him like a shadow. Across the aisle, Abby Taylor caught his eye. She gave him a small, reassuring smile before speaking. "I'm sorry about what happened back there," she said, her voice soft but steady. "It wasn't right." Elliot nodded, his expression softening. "Thank you," he said simply. Her kindness, though unexpected, was a small but powerful balm. For a moment, Elliot felt the tension in his chest loosen. He didn't know it yet, but Abby's gesture was the first ripple in what would become a much larger wave, a wave that would challenge assumptions, create change, and remind Elliot of the enduring power of perseverance and kindness. As the plane lifted off, Elliot closed his eyes, the torn ticket still resting in his pocket. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. This was just the beginning. The steady hum of the airplane filled the first-class cabin as passengers settled into the quiet routines of a long flight. Elliot Marshall sat in his seat, staring out the window. The sprawling runway of Denver International faded into a patchwork of earth and sky below, but his thoughts lingered on what had happened at the gate. The torn ticket weighed heavily in his pocket, its jagged edges a sharp reminder of the humiliation he had endured. It wasn't the first time Elliot had been confronted by someone who saw him as less than he was. Still, the sting of the moment lingered, the smirk on the gate agent's face, the murmur of passengers' whispers, the stark question of whether anyone would have spoken up had it not been for the young woman. Elliot's gaze drifted across the cabin, landing on her. The woman, Abby Taylor, as he'd learned from a quick exchange earlier, sat just across the aisle, a tablet balanced on her lap. Her dark hair was tucked behind her ears, and she looked every bit the focused student she claimed to be. Occasionally she glanced toward Elliot, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. After a moment, Abby leaned toward him. I hope I'm not bothering you, she began softly, but I just wanted to say again how sorry I am for what happened back there. Elliot turned to her, surprised by her persistence. It wasn't your fault, he replied, his tone even. But thank you for speaking up. Abby nodded, her brow furrowing. It just didn't sit right with me. What she did, tearing your ticket like that, it wasn't just rude. It was wrong. Elliot studied her for a moment, appreciating the earnestness in her voice. You didn't have to say anything, he said. Most people wouldn't have. That's the problem, though, Abby said, leaning back in her seat. Too many people don't say anything. I guess I've been thinking about that a lot lately. She paused, as if considering whether to continue. Then, with a quiet exhale, she added, I'm a grad student, studying systemic inequities. I read about things like this all the time, but seeing it happen in real life, it hit differently. Elliot nodded slowly. It's one thing to read about it, he said. It's another to live it. Abby's expression shifted, a flicker of understanding passing over her face. I can't imagine how exhausting it must be, she said, her voice quieter now. Dealing with this over and over. It's not easy, Elliot admitted, but you learn to pick your battles. Abby tilted her head, her curiosity apparent. Why didn't you get angry? I mean, you had every right to. Elliot smiled faintly, though there was no humor in it. I've learned that anger doesn't always help. Sometimes it just gives people an excuse to ignore the real issue. Staying calm forces them to face their actions. Abby nodded, her respect for him growing. You handled it better than I think I would have. Their conversation paused as the flight attendant passed by with a tray of drinks. When she reached Elliot's row, her movements slowed ever so slightly, her eyes flickering with hesitation. Would you care for anything, sir? She asked, her tone overly polite. No, thank you, Elliot replied, noticing the subtle pause. It was a small thing, but it added to the pile of microaggressions he had encountered throughout his life. He exhaled slowly, turning back to Abby, who watched the interaction with a frown. Does that happen a lot? She asked. Elliot hesitated before answering. More than I'd like, he admitted, but you get used to it. Abby shook her head. I don't think you should have to get used to it. Her words hung in the air, unexpectedly poignant. For Elliot, they were a reminder of how much work still needed to be done, not just in changing systems, but in changing hearts and minds. As the flight continued, their conversation shifted to other topics. Abby asked Elliot about his work, and he shared a brief overview of his journey from working in his father's hardware store to building Marshall Tech into a nationally recognized company. He spoke with a quiet humility, but Abby could sense the pride beneath his words. That's incredible, she said. You've accomplished so much. It wasn't easy, Elliot said, but it was worth it. I wanted to prove to myself and to others that I could succeed. Abby studied him, her expression thoughtful. Do you ever feel like people only see what they want to see? Like, no matter how much you accomplish, they still try to put you in a box? Elliot's gaze shifted to the window, the clouds stretching endlessly beyond the glass. All the time, he said. But the trick is not to let them define you. You have to know your own worth, even when others don't. Abby nodded, her admiration for him growing. That's powerful, she said. I think more people need to hear that. Elliot chuckled softly. Maybe someday I'll find a way to tell them. By the time the plane touched down in Seattle, the tension of the earlier incident had eased, replaced by a tentative sense of connection. Abby gathered her belongings, glancing at Elliot as they prepared to disembark. I hope we cross paths again, she said, her voice sincere. Elliot smiled. So do I. As they parted ways in the terminal, Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that their brief interaction had been more significant than it seemed. Abby's courage in speaking up, her willingness to engage with him, it was a reminder that, despite the challenges, There were people willing to stand alongside him in the fight for fairness and respect. That evening, as Elliot sat in his hotel room, he reflected on the day's events. The torn ticket still sat in his pocket, its edges frayed from his fingers, tracing it absent-mindedly. It was a symbol of the barriers he faced, but also of the moments of unexpected kindness that had the power to break through them. He thought of Abby's words, how she had challenged him to consider the importance of speaking out, of using his voice to create change. It wasn't a role he had sought, but perhaps it was one he could embrace. For now, though, he allowed himself a moment of quiet gratitude. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it was one he felt newly inspired to undertake. And in the back of his mind, he couldn't help but wonder what ripples might come from the small act of kindness he had experienced today. Elliot Marshall sat at the small desk in his Seattle hotel room, the pale morning light filtering through the curtains. His laptop sat open in front of him, its screen glowing with an influx of emails. Among the usual updates from his team at Marshall Tech, one subject line caught his eye: video from Abby Taylor. He clicked it, unsure what to expect. The email was brief. "Hi, Mr. Marshall. I wanted to share the video I took at the airport. People deserve to see what you went through. I hope this helps." Below her message was a link. With a mix of curiosity and trepidation, Elliot clicked. The video began playing. It was the scene at the gate, captured with stark clarity. The agent tearing his ticket, her dismissive words, and Abby's intervention. The voices of nearby passengers murmuring their disapproval added weight to the footage. Watching it unfold from an outside perspective felt surreal, like revisiting a memory you had tried to set aside. Elliot leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. He could see why Abby had sent it. The video wasn't just about him. It was about the broader issue of how people were treated, judged, and dismissed. Still, he wasn't sure he was ready for the attention this video might bring. A soft chime from his laptop pulled him from his thoughts. Abby had forwarded another email with a simple note: "It's already gaining traction." Curious, Elliot opened the link and was startled to find the video had already been posted online, likely by Abby. It was quickly going viral, with thousands of views and comments pouring in. The captions were poignant. "Man's dignity questioned, but kindness sparks change." Some comments offered sympathy and outrage, while others shared similar stories of bias and unfair treatment. Elliot's breath hitched as he read through the messages. The video had sparked something far greater than he had anticipated: a conversation, a wave of awareness. It was overwhelming, but also oddly empowering. Perhaps this was what Abby had meant when she said people needed to see it. Later that day, while Elliot prepared for his meeting in Seattle, his phone buzzed with a call from Abby. He hesitated before answering, unsure how he felt about the video's sudden reach. "Mr. Marshall?" Abby's voice came through, bright but concerned. "I hope it's okay that I shared the video. I just felt like people needed to know." Elliot exhaled slowly. "I'm not upset," he said, "but I wasn't expecting this kind of response." "It's incredible," Abby said, her words tumbling out quickly. "People are talking about it, sharing their own experiences. It's more than just your story. Now it's shining a light on something bigger." Elliot rubbed the back of his neck, processing her words. "I'm not used to being in the spotlight," he admitted. "I've always focused on my work, on what I can control." "Maybe that's why this is so important," Abby said. "You've lived it. People are looking to you, whether you like it or not." Her words lingered in his mind long after the call ended. He had always prided himself on his ability to navigate challenges quietly, to let his work speak for itself. But now, his story was out in the open, sparking conversations he hadn't intended but couldn't ignore. 2 days later, back in Denver, Elliot returned to his office to find another email waiting for him. This one was from a teacher in Portland named Linda Waters. The subject line read, "Thank you for inspiring my students." Elliot opened the email, Curiosity piqued. Linda's message was heartfelt and unpolished. "I came across the video of what happened to you," she wrote. "I shared it with my high school class as part of a lesson on perseverance and speaking up. Your composure in that moment and the courage of the young woman who supported you sparked a powerful discussion. My students talked about how small acts of kindness can make a big difference. Thank you for reminding us of that." Elliot sat back in his chair, reading the email twice. The idea that his experience could inspire others, especially young people, was humbling. He thought about his father, who had always taught him to treat people with respect, no matter their station in life. Those lessons had shaped him, just as this video was now shaping the perspectives of others. The days that followed brought more emails, calls, and messages. Some were from people sharing their own stories of bias and discrimination. Others were offers of support, asking how they could help. One message, however, stood out among the rest. A letter from Emily Carson, the gate agent who had torn his ticket. Elliot hesitated before opening it, unsure if he wanted to revisit that moment. But curiosity got the better of him. The letter was handwritten, its tone raw and unpolished. "Mr. Marshall," it began, "I owe you an apology. I judged you unfairly and acted in a way that was not only unprofessional, but cruel. I have spent every day since thinking about what I did and why I did it. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know how sorry I am. What I did wasn't just wrong, it was a failure to see you for who you are. I want to do better, and I hope to prove that in time." Elliot read the letter twice, his emotions conflicted. Part of him wanted to dismiss it as too little, too late. But another part saw the sincerity in her words. People could change. He believed that. The question was whether she truly would. He decided to respond, keeping his tone measured but firm. "Ms. Carson," he wrote, "thank you for your letter. Acknowledging your actions is an important first step, but real change comes from reflection and action. If you are serious about doing better, I encourage you to educate yourself on the biases we all carry and find ways to challenge them in your work and your life. Kindness and growth are always possible." Elliot's response marked a turning point. It wasn't about absolving Emily, but about challenging her to rise to the moment. In many ways, it mirrored what Abby had done for him, pushing him to see the potential for change and inspiring him to act. As he folded the letter and placed it on his desk, Elliot felt a quiet resolve settling within him. The events at the airport had been painful, but they had also sparked something unexpected. A ripple of connection, conversation, and possibility. The next step, he realized, wasn't just about reacting to the wave of attention. It was about deciding how to use it. Abby's words echoed in his mind. "People are looking to you." He wasn't sure where this path would lead, but he knew he couldn't turn back. The torn ticket in his pocket wasn't just a reminder of what he had endured. It was a symbol of the power of resilience and the ripples of kindness that could grow into waves of change. Elliot Marshall folded the handwritten letter from Emily Carson for the third time, his thumb brushing the edges of the paper. He had read her words enough to have them memorized. The apology was heartfelt, but it stirred a blend of emotions he couldn't easily categorize: anger, sympathy, and something more elusive, hope. Her actions at the gate had humiliated him in ways that were hard to articulate, but her words now hinted at genuine regret. Could someone who had caused such harm truly change? Elliot wasn't sure. He had already responded, choosing to acknowledge her effort, but also challenge her to prove her sincerity through action. Now, as he sat in his quiet home office, he wondered what, if anything, would come of it. The morning sun streamed through the window, warming the room's minimalist decor. A framed photo of his father's old hardware store hung on the wall, a reminder of where he had started. On the desk lay a crumpled scrap of paper, the torn remnants of his first-class ticket. He had kept it, though he wasn't entirely sure why. It was a symbol of something, though its meaning seemed to evolve with each passing day. His laptop chimed with an incoming email, pulling him from his thoughts. The subject line read, "An invitation to speak." He opened it, scanning the message quickly. A professor from a local community college in Denver had seen the viral video and was asking Elliot to give a talk about his experiences both as a CEO and as someone who had navigated systemic challenges throughout his career. Elliot hesitated. Public speaking wasn't his comfort zone. His success had been built on quiet determination and hard work, not on seeking the spotlight. But Abby's words lingered in his mind. People are looking to you. Maybe it was time to step into the role he hadn't asked for, but now felt compelled to embrace. A week later, Elliot stood backstage at the college auditorium, adjusting his tie. The room beyond the curtain buzzed with the low hum of students shuffling into their seats. He could hear the professor's voice introducing him. Elliot Marshall has built an incredible career as the CEO of Marshall Tech, but today he's here to talk about something even more profound: perseverance, resilience, and the power of small actions to create change. Elliot took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The room was modest, filled with students ranging from bright-eyed teenagers to older adults juggling careers and education. Their faces reflected curiosity, expectation, and a touch of skepticism. "Good morning," Elliot began, his voice steady but measured. "I'll be honest, I'm not used to standing in front of a crowd like this. Most of my work happens behind the scenes, but I'm here today because of a moment that forced me to confront something I've spent most of my life navigating." He recounted the incident at the gate, careful not to let the story drift into self-pity. Instead, he focused on the broader implications, how assumptions and biases could ripple outward, shaping interactions and opportunities in ways both subtle and profound. "But this story isn't just about what happened to me," he said, his tone softening. "It's about what happened after. A young woman named Abby Taylor stood up for me when she didn't have to. That small act of kindness reminded me that change starts with people who are willing to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the audience. "Every one of you has that power. Whether it's in your classroom, your workplace, or your community, you have the ability to challenge what's wrong and stand for what's right." The room was silent for a moment, then broke into applause. Elliot scanned the audience, spotting a young man in the front row who seemed particularly engaged. After the talk, the students crowded around him, eager to ask questions and share their thoughts. The young man from the front row approached, his expression nervous but determined. "Mr. Marshall, my name's Jordan," he said. "I'm studying business, and hearing your story today, it really hit home. Sometimes it feels like no matter how hard I work, people still look at me like I don't belong. How do you stay hopeful when that keeps happening?" Elliot studied Jordan's face, seeing shades of his younger self reflected in the student's earnest eyes. "Hope isn't about ignoring the challenges," he said. "It's about believing they can be overcome. You prove your worth to yourself first. Everything else follows." Jordan nodded, his shoulders straightening slightly. "Thank you," he said. "I needed to hear that." The experience stayed with Elliot long after he left the college. Jordan's question gnawed at him, a reminder of how many young people were struggling to see their own potential in the face of bias and barriers. He thought about Abby's courage, Emily's apology, and the emails he had received from people inspired by his story. The ripples of that single moment at the airport were growing, but Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that there was more he could do. A few days later, he called Abby. "I've been thinking," he said when she picked up. "What if we take this momentum and turn it into something lasting? A mentorship program for students like Jordan, something that gives them the tools and opportunities they need to succeed." Abby's enthusiasm was immediate. "That's an amazing idea. What would it look like?" "We'd pair students with mentors in their fields," Elliot explained. "We'd teach them not just the technical skills, but how to navigate the challenges that come with being underestimated. Abby was quiet for a moment, then said, "We could call it the Bridge Initiative. You know, building bridges to opportunity." Elliot smiled. "I like it. Let's make it happen." Over the next few weeks, Elliot and Abby worked tirelessly to lay the foundation for the Bridge Initiative. Abby reached out to her network, securing partnerships with local schools and organizations, while Elliot leveraged his business connections to recruit mentors and fund the program. Together, they built a framework that offered internships, workshops, and one-on-one mentorship sessions. Elliot's first mentee was Jordan. Their sessions quickly became the highlight of Elliot's week. He saw in Jordan the same determination he had once carried, tempered by the uncertainty that came with navigating a world not built for him. Through their conversations, Elliot helped Jordan refine his goals, tackle obstacles, and find his confidence. But it wasn't just Jordan who was growing. Elliot found himself energized by the work, inspired by the students' resilience and their hunger for opportunity. The Bridge Initiative wasn't just about mentoring, it was about giving young people a chance to rewrite the narratives that had held them back. As Elliot reflected on the journey so far, he realized how interconnected it all was. Abby's courage, Emily's apology, Jordan's determination. They were all part of the same story, a story of resilience and the quiet power of kindness. The torn ticket in his pocket was no longer a symbol of humiliation. It was a reminder of how even the smallest ripples could grow into waves. And Elliot was ready to keep pushing forward, one bridge at a time. Elliot Marshall stood in the bright, airy community center that had become the headquarters for the Bridge Initiative. Around him, students and mentors moved between tables set up for the program's first major workshop. It was a career-building event featuring resume critiques, mock interviews, and panels with professionals from various industries. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. At the front of the room, Abby Taylor was in her element, greeting attendees with her characteristic warmth. She carried a clipboard filled with notes, her focused demeanor cutting through the mild chaos. Meanwhile, Jordan stood by the registration desk, handing out name tags and smiling shyly at each new arrival. Elliot watched the scene unfold, pride swelling in his chest. What had started as an idea over a phone call with Abby had become something tangible, something meaningful. The room filled quickly, and Elliot stepped up to the podium to welcome the group. The students quieted, their eyes bright with anticipation. "Good morning, everyone," Elliot began, his voice steady. "When we started the Bridge Initiative, we had one goal: to help young people navigate the barriers that too often stand in the way of success. But this program is about more than just mentorship or career advice. It's about building bridges between opportunity and potential, between ambition and achievement, and most importantly, between people." He paused, letting his words settle before continuing. "Each of you has the power to make a difference, not just in your own life, but in the lives of those around you. Today is about taking the first step." The room erupted into applause, and Elliot stepped back, allowing Abby to introduce the first session. As the event progressed, Elliot floated between groups, observing the interactions and offering advice where needed. He was struck by the energy in the room, the palpable hope, the eagerness to learn and grow. This was the kind of impact he had always dreamed of making, but never quite knew how to achieve. During a break, Jordan approached Elliot with a nervous smile. "Mr. Marshall," he said, holding up a folder, "do you have a minute? I wanted to get your feedback on something." "Of course," Elliot said, motioning for Jordan to sit with him at a nearby table. Jordan handed over his resume, which was neatly formatted but sparse. Elliot scanned it, noticing a lack of relevant experience. "You've got a solid foundation here," Elliot said, "but we need to highlight your strengths more. Talk about the projects you've worked on in school, the leadership roles you've taken on, even volunteer work. It all matters." Jordan nodded, scribbling notes as Elliot spoke. I've never thought of those things as important, he admitted. I always figured employers just wanted people with experience. Experience is part of it, Elliot said. But so is potential. Your story, your determination, those things set you apart. Don't underestimate their value. Jordan's eyes lit up with newfound confidence. Thank you, he said. I'll work on it. Elliot smiled, feeling a familiar satisfaction. Helping Jordan refine his resume wasn't just about getting him a job, it was about helping him see his own worth. As the day wound down, Elliot found himself in a quiet corner of the room with Abby. She looked tired but satisfied, her clipboard now filled with feedback from the attendees. This turned out better than I imagined, Abby said, glancing around the room. The students are so engaged. It's amazing to see. It's because of the work you've put in, Elliot replied. You've been the heart of this program. Abby waved him off with a laugh. I'm just organizing things. You're the one who's inspiring them. Elliot shook his head. This is bigger than me. It's about all of us, Jordan, the mentors, even Emily. Abby's expression softened. Speaking of Emily, she's been incredible. Her workshop on overcoming biases was one of the most popular sessions today. People really connected with her honesty. Elliot nodded, thinking back to Emily's journey. When he had invited her to join the Bridge Initiative, he hadn't been sure what to expect, but she had proven herself, dedicating countless hours to the program and sharing her story with an openness that had surprised even him. She's come a long way, Elliot said. I think this program is as much a second chance for her as it is for the students. That evening, as Elliot locked up the community center, his phone buzzed with a message from Jordan. It was a simple text. Thank you for believing in me. I won't let you down. Elliot stared at the screen for a moment, his heart heavy with emotion. He thought about the torn ticket still tucked away in his desk drawer, a painful memory that had somehow led to this moment. The journey had been unexpected, but it had reminded him of something he had always known deep down. Small acts of kindness could create ripples that extended far beyond their origin. In the weeks that followed, the Bridge Initiative gained momentum. News of its success spread, and more students signed up to participate. Abby worked tirelessly to expand the program's reach, securing partnerships with local businesses and securing funding for additional workshops. Meanwhile, Elliot continued to mentor Jordan, watching with pride as the young man grew more confident and capable. But the program's impact extended beyond the students. Mentors reported feeling reinvigorated by their roles, inspired by the resilience and ambition of the young people they worked with. Even Emily, who had once been a source of pain for Elliot, had become a symbol of transformation and redemption. One afternoon, as Elliot prepared for a meeting, Abby burst into his office, her excitement barely contained. "You won't believe this," she said, holding up a letter. "We just got an invitation to present the Bridge Initiative at a national conference on equity in education." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "A national conference?" Abby nodded, her smile wide. "This could take the program to the next level. Imagine what we could do with national exposure." Elliot leaned back in his chair, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The torn ticket, the humiliation at the gate, the kindness of a stranger, they had all led to this. What had started as a small ripple was now growing into a wave, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of countless people. "All right," Elliot said, his voice steady. "Let's make it happen." As Abby left the office to start planning, Elliot allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The journey had been challenging, but it had also been profoundly rewarding. The Bridge Initiative was more than a program. It was a testament to the power of resilience, kindness, and the belief that even the smallest actions could create lasting change. And for Elliot, that was only the beginning. The buzz around the Bridge Initiative was growing, and with the upcoming presentation at the national conference, Elliot Marshall and Abby Taylor found themselves busier than ever. Each day brought new inquiries, new opportunities, and new challenges. What had started as a local mentorship program was quickly gaining traction, with businesses and educators eager to replicate its success in other cities. Elliot's schedule was packed, but he carved out time each week for one-on-one mentorship sessions with Jordan. Their meetings had evolved from basic career coaching to deeper discussions about leadership, resilience, and navigating the unspoken barriers of the professional world. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, as Elliot prepared for a strategy meeting, he received a call from an unexpected number. When he answered, the voice on the other end was hesitant but familiar. "Mr. Marshall, it's Emily Carson." Elliot leaned back in his chair, surprised. "Emily, what can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you," she said, her voice steadier now, "for letting me be part of the Bridge initiative. It's changed me in ways I didn't expect." Elliot paused, choosing his words carefully. "You've earned your place, Emily. The students appreciate your honesty, and so do I." Her voice softened. "I wasn't sure if I could contribute, especially after everything. But being part of this program has opened my eyes. It's helped me see how much work I need to do, and how much good I can do." Elliot nodded, though she couldn't see him. Acknowledging that is the first step. The rest is about following through. "That's why I called," Emily continued. "I know the national conference is coming up, and I'd like to help. I've been working on a presentation about implicit bias, how it shows up in small ways, and how we can address it. I think it could complement what you and Abby are planning." Elliot was silent for a moment, processing her request. He had seen Emily's transformation firsthand, but he also knew how deeply her actions at the gate had hurt him. Inviting her to join the conference presentation felt like a significant step, one he wasn't sure he was ready for. "Let me think about it," he said finally. "I'll talk it over with Abby." "Thank you," Emily said, her relief evident. "I appreciate it." That evening, Elliot met with Abby at the community center. The two of them had fallen into a rhythm of working late into the night, fueled by coffee and a shared sense of purpose. As they reviewed their presentation for the conference, Elliot brought up Emily's request. "She wants to help?" Abby asked, her eyebrows lifting in surprise. "She's been running workshops for the program," Elliot said. "The students respond well to her, and she's been honest about her mistakes. She says she's ready to talk about it on a bigger stage." Abby leaned back, tapping her pen against her notebook. "It's risky. If people know what happened between you two, it could complicate things. But if she's sincere, and I think she is, it could also make a powerful statement." Elliot sighed. "That's what I'm struggling with. I want to believe in her growth, but part of me still remembers how it felt to stand at that gate." Abby nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Sometimes the best allies are the ones who've made mistakes. She's not trying to erase what happened. She's trying to learn from it. Maybe giving her this chance is part of the change we're working toward." Elliot considered her words, the tension in his chest easing slightly. "You're right," he said. "I'll let her join us." Over the next few weeks, the three of them worked together to prepare for the conference. Emily's presentation focused on her own journey, how she had internalized biases she hadn't even realized she carried, and how her actions at the gate had forced her to confront them. It was raw and vulnerable, and it complemented the broader themes of the Bridge initiative perfectly. Elliot and Abby focused on the program's impact, highlighting stories like Jordan's. They shared data on improved career readiness and testimonials from students and mentors, weaving together a narrative that was both compelling and actionable. The collaboration wasn't without its challenges. Emily often hesitated, second-guessing her place in the group. But each time, Elliot reminded her that growth required discomfort and that her story had the power to inspire others. When the day of the conference arrived, the trio stood backstage, waiting for their turn to present. The auditorium was packed with educators, business leaders, and community organizers from across the country. Elliot adjusted his tie, glancing at Emily, who was nervously fidgeting with her note cards. "You'll do fine," he said, his voice steady. "Just speak from the heart." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "Thank you for giving me this chance." Abby placed a reassuring hand on Emily's shoulder. "We're all in this together." The presentation was a success. Abby opened with an overview of the Bridge Initiative, her passion shining through as she described the program's goals and achievements. Elliot followed, sharing his personal journey and the pivotal moment at the gate that had sparked the initiative. Finally, Emily stepped forward. The room fell silent as she began to speak. "A little over a year ago, I made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "I judged someone unfairly, and I acted on those judgments in a way that hurt not just him, but everyone who witnessed it. That someone was Elliot Marshall." She paused, her eyes meeting Elliot's briefly before continuing. "Since then, I've been working to understand where those biases came from and how I can do better. Being part of the Bridge Initiative has taught me that growth is possible, but it requires honesty, accountability, and action." The audience listened intently, and by the time Emily finished, the applause was thunderous. Her vulnerability had struck a chord, and her willingness to confront her past had turned her into an unexpected ally in the fight for equity. That evening, as the three of them sat in a quiet restaurant celebrating their success, Elliot reflected on how far they had come. The torn ticket that had once symbolized humiliation had become the catalyst for something extraordinary. The Bridge Initiative was no longer just a program, it was a movement, one built on the belief that everyone, even those who had made mistakes, had the capacity to create change. Elliot raised his glass, a rare smile breaking across his face. "To bridges," he said, his voice filled with quiet pride, "and to the people who build them." Abby and Emily clinked their glasses against his, their smiles mirroring his own. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Elliot felt certain that they were on the right path together. The national conference marked a turning point for the Bridge Initiative. The response to the presentation was overwhelmingly positive, with attendees eager to bring the program to their own communities. Educators, business leaders, and advocates approached Elliot Marshall and his team with heartfelt praise and ideas for collaboration. It felt like a validation of all the work they had poured into the program, a moment that proved their efforts were making a tangible impact. For Emily Carson, the experience had been transformative. Sharing her story on such a public stage had been terrifying, but the response had shown her the power of vulnerability. People approached her afterward, thanking her for her honesty and admitting that they had recognized parts of themselves in her story. It was a humbling experience, one that reinforced her commitment to growth. Elliot, Abby, and Emily returned to Denver energized and ready to expand the initiative. As they worked through the influx of new opportunities, Elliot found himself reflecting on the unexpected journey that had brought them here. The torn ticket that once symbolized humiliation now felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the progress they had made and the relationships they had built. A few weeks after the conference, Elliot received a call from Jordan. The young man sounded nervous but excited. "Mr. Marshall, I have some news," Jordan began, his voice tinged with disbelief. "I got the internship at Horizon Tech." Elliot smiled, the pride in his chest swelling. Horizon Tech was a major player in the industry, and an internship there could open doors for Jordan's future. "That's incredible, Jordan," Elliot said. "You've worked hard for this. I knew you'd get it." Jordan laughed, the sound light with relief. "I couldn't have done it without you or the Bridge Initiative. Thank you for believing in me." "You earned it," Elliot replied. "And remember, this is just the beginning. Make the most of this opportunity." "I will," Jordan promised. "And someday, I want to give back. I want to help someone else the way you helped me." After the call ended, Elliot leaned back in his chair, the weight of Jordan's words settling over him. Jordan's success was a testament to the program's impact, but it also reminded Elliot of the responsibility that came with their work. The Bridge Initiative wasn't just about giving people opportunities, it was about inspiring them to pay it forward, to create a ripple effect of kindness and support. Meanwhile, Abby was hard at work organizing the next phase of the initiative's expansion. The program had secured partnerships in Seattle, Chicago, and Atlanta, and Abby was juggling the logistics of launching in 3 new cities simultaneously. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Elliot often found himself marveling at her ability to manage so many moving parts. One afternoon, as they reviewed progress reports, Abby looked up from her laptop with a thoughtful expression. "You know, none of this would have happened without what you went through at the airport," she said. "It's strange, isn't it, how something so awful could lead to something so good?" Elliot nodded, his gaze distant. "It's a reminder that even the worst moments can hold the seeds of change. But it also makes me think about how much work is still left to do." Abby smiled. "Well, lucky for us, you're not the type to back down from a challenge." Elliot chuckled softly. "I don't think I could, even if I wanted to." The work wasn't without its challenges. Expanding the Bridge Initiative meant navigating new partnerships, addressing cultural differences across regions, and securing the funding needed to sustain the program's growth. Elliot often found himself in meetings with corporate sponsors, carefully balancing his passion for the initiative with the need to appeal to their bottom line. During one such meeting with a potential donor, the conversation turned to the program's origins. The executive, a middle-aged man with a polished demeanor, leaned forward with interest. "I've heard about your story," he said. "What happened at the airport. It's powerful, but I'm curious, do you ever wish it hadn't happened? That you hadn't been put in that position?" Elliot paused, considering the question. It was one he had asked himself many times in quieter moments. The humiliation he had felt at the gate had been real, and the journey since had been far from easy. But without that moment, none of this, the Bridge Initiative, the relationships he had built, the lives they had touched, would exist. "I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone," Elliot said finally, "but I also wouldn't trade what's come out of it. It taught me that even painful moments can lead to something meaningful if we're willing to face them head-on." The executive nodded, impressed. "That's a perspective more people could use. I think we can work together on this." As the Bridge Initiative grew, so did the relationships within it. Jordan continued to thrive, not just in his internship, but as a mentor to newer students in the program. He often shared his journey during workshops, encouraging others to believe in their potential. Emily, too, found her role expanding. Her workshops on bias and accountability became a cornerstone of the initiative, drawing praise from students and mentors alike. She had found a sense of purpose in the work, and her connection with Elliot had deepened into mutual respect. One evening, after a particularly successful event, Emily approached Elliot as they packed up. "I've been thinking a lot about second chances," she said. "Not just the one you gave me, but the ones we're giving these students. It's like, every time we help someone see their worth, it's another chance for all of us to grow." Elliot nodded, her words resonating. "That's the heart of this program," he said. "It's not just about building bridges for others, it's about crossing them ourselves." That night, as Elliot returned home, he thought about the road ahead. The Bridge Initiative was becoming something far bigger than he had imagined, but the core of its mission remained the same: to create opportunities, challenge assumptions, and inspire change. The torn ticket still sat in the top drawer of his desk, its edges frayed from the times he had held it, turning it over in his hands. It was a reminder of where this journey had begun, but it was no longer a symbol of pain. It was a testament to the power of resilience, to the kindness of a stranger, and to the belief that even the smallest act could spark a wave of transformation. Elliot closed the drawer with a sense of quiet determination. The work wasn't finished, not by a long shot, but the ripples were growing, and he was ready to keep pushing forward, one bridge at a time. The hum of activity in the Denver Community Center was more intense than ever. Tables overflowed with brochures for the Bridge Initiative, laptops glowed with spreadsheets and schedules, and the phone in the corner rang constantly. The program's expansion into Seattle, Chicago, and Atlanta was in full swing, and Elliot Marshall found himself busier than he had ever been. Abby Taylor bustled into the room, her energy as vibrant as always. She carried a large poster board covered in charts and diagrams, her ever-present clipboard tucked under her arm. "Good news," she announced, setting the board on a nearby table. "We've confirmed sponsorships from 3 major companies for the Chicago launch. That covers the next 2 years of funding for mentorship workshops and career placement programs." Elliot nodded, his smile faint but genuine. "You're a miracle worker, Abby." She shrugged playfully. "Just doing what I do best, making your vision a reality." Elliot chuckled, though he couldn't deny that Abby's contributions went far beyond logistics. The Bridge Initiative had become a shared dream, one that was as much hers as his. Together, they were shaping it into something that could endure long after they were gone. Across the room, Jordan stood in a small group of students, animatedly discussing an upcoming internship fair. His confidence had blossomed over the past few months, and he had quickly become one of the program's standout participants. Elliot watched him with quiet pride, marveling at how far Jordan had come since their first mentorship session. "Mr. Marshall," Jordan called out, breaking away from the group to approach him. "Do you have a second?" "Always," Elliot replied. Jordan held out a flyer, the edges slightly crumpled. "It's for a leadership summit at Horizon Tech. They're inviting interns to present ideas for community outreach programs. I thought maybe I could pitch something connected to the Bridge Initiative." Elliot studied the flyer, a smile spreading across his face. "That's a fantastic idea, Jordan. What do you have in mind?" "Well," Jordan began, his enthusiasm bubbling over, "I was thinking about a mentorship model for high school students, kind of like what we're doing here, but focused on getting them interested in STEM careers. I figured if we start earlier, we can help kids see opportunities they might not even know exist." Elliot's chest swelled with pride. "That's brilliant," he said. "If you need help preparing, let me know." Jordan grinned. "Thank you. I'll make you proud." "You already have," Elliot said. As the day wore on, the team gathered for a strategy meeting to finalize plans for the program's national expansion. Emily Carson sat near the front of the room, flipping through a stack of papers. Her presence had become a fixture in the initiative, and her workshops on implicit bias had gained national attention. Watching her now, Elliot felt a twinge of something he hadn't expected: admiration. Emily had come a long way from the woman who had torn his ticket at the airport. She had embraced the discomfort of confronting her own biases, turning her misstep into a catalyst for growth, not just for herself, but for others. "Emily," Elliot said as the meeting wrapped up, "how's the outreach in Atlanta coming along?" "It's going well," she replied, her tone confident. "We've connected with local schools and community leaders, and the interest has been overwhelming. People really want to be part of this." Elliot nodded. "That's good to hear. Keep me updated." As the team began to disperse, Emily lingered, her expression thoughtful. "Elliot," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked. "From that day at the airport to this. Sometimes it feels surreal." Elliot considered her words. "I think about it all the time," he admitted. "It's a reminder of how much people can change and how much we still have to do." Emily smiled, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you for giving me the chance to be part of this. It's changed my life." "You've earned it," Elliot said, "and you've proven that second chances matter." That evening, Elliot returned to his office, the faint hum of the city filtering through the windows. He sat at his desk, staring at the framed remnants of his torn ticket. It was a ritual he had developed, a way to ground himself in the purpose of his work. The ticket no longer represented humiliation. It was a symbol of resilience, transformation, and the power of unexpected kindness. His phone buzzed with a message from Abby. "Check your email. Something amazing just came through." Elliot opened his laptop and found an email from a national news outlet. The subject line read, "Feature on the Bridge Initiative." He scanned the message quickly. The network wanted to do a story on the program, highlighting its success and the personal journeys of its participants. Elliot leaned back in his chair, a wave of disbelief washing over him. The idea of sharing their work on such a large platform was both exhilarating and daunting, but he knew this was the next step, the chance to inspire others to join their movement. He called Abby immediately. "They want to do a feature on us," he said, his voice steady but tinged with excitement. "I know," Abby replied, practically buzzing through the phone. "This could take everything to the next level." "It's a big step," Elliot said. "Are we ready for it?" "We're as ready as we'll ever be," Abby said confidently. "And besides, you've always told me that change starts with showing up." Elliot smiled. "All right, let's make it happen." In the days leading up to the interview, the team worked tirelessly to prepare. They gathered stories from students and mentors, compiled data on the program's impact, and rehearsed their key points. By the time the news crew arrived, the community center was abuzz with anticipation. The interview itself was a whirlwind. Elliot, Abby, and Emily took turns sharing their perspectives, each offering a unique piece of the story. Jordan even made an appearance, speaking about how the Bridge Initiative had changed his life and inspired him to give back. When the feature aired, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages poured in from across the country, people wanting to donate, volunteer, or bring the program to their own communities. The Bridge Initiative had officially become a movement. That night, as Elliot stood on his balcony overlooking the city, he felt a rare sense of peace. The road ahead would be long, and the challenges would be many, but for the first time, he felt certain they were on the right path. The torn ticket was a distant memory, but its lesson remained clear. Even the smallest moments could spark change, and the quiet power of kindness could grow into something extraordinary. As the city lights shimmered below, Elliot allowed himself a small smile. The ripples were becoming waves, and he was ready to see how far they could reach. The morning after the national news feature aired, the Bridge Initiative headquarters at the Denver Community Center was a hive of activity. Phones rang incessantly, and emails flooded in from people across the country, teachers asking how to start mentorship programs, business leaders offering funding, and individuals volunteering their time. The story had struck a chord, turning the initiative from a local success into a national movement. Elliot Marshall sat in his office, reviewing messages while sipping his first coffee of the day. Abby Taylor appeared in the doorway, her expression a mix of exhaustion and excitement. "Good problem to have, right?" she said, holding up a tablet displaying the initiative's inbox. "We're officially overwhelmed." Elliot chuckled. "Overwhelmed is good. It means people are paying attention." Abby slid into the chair across from him, her clipboard balanced on her lap. "We need a plan to manage this interest. Scaling up isn't just about funding, it's about infrastructure. We need more staff, better technology, and a stronger framework if we're going to handle this growth." "You're right," Elliot said, setting his mug down. "Let's put together a roadmap. We'll need to prioritize which cities to expand to next and focus on building partnerships in those areas." Abby nodded, already jotting down notes. "I'll start making calls." By midday, the team had gathered for an emergency strategy meeting. Emily Carson joined them, her notes meticulously organized. Over the past few months, Emily had become a key member of the initiative's leadership team. Her workshops on addressing implicit bias had become so popular that other organizations had started reaching out, asking her to adapt them for their own training programs. As the group brainstormed ideas, Emily spoke up. "I've been thinking about something," she said, her voice steady but thoughtful. "What if we create a Train the Trainer program? Instead of trying to do everything ourselves, we could empower local leaders to run their own Bridge Initiative chapters. That way, the program can grow without us having to be everywhere at once." The room fell silent as the team considered her idea. Abby was the first to respond, her eyes lighting up. "That's brilliant. It decentralizes the work, but keeps the mission consistent." Elliot nodded slowly. "It could work, but we'd need to ensure the quality of the program stays high. We'll have to create a detailed curriculum and provide ongoing support for these local leaders." "I can start drafting the framework," Emily offered. "It'll be an extension of what we're already doing." "Let's do it," Elliot said. "This could be the key to taking the initiative nationwide." As the team dove into their new plans, Elliot found himself reflecting on how far they had come. The torn ticket that had once been a source of humiliation now felt like a distant memory, replaced by the satisfaction of seeing their work transform lives. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. One afternoon, as Elliot prepared for a donor meeting, Jordan stopped by his office. The young man was dressed sharply in a suit, his confidence radiating as he stepped inside. "Mr. Marshall, do you have a minute?" Jordan asked. "Always," Elliot said, motioning for him to sit. "I wanted to thank you again," Jordan began. "The internship at Horizon Tech has been amazing. I'm learning so much, and it's because of you and the Bridge Initiative." Elliot smiled. "You've earned every opportunity, Jordan. We just gave you the tools to get started." Jordan hesitated, his expression growing serious. "I've been thinking about something. When my internship ends, I want to come back and work with the Bridge Initiative. I want to help other students the way you helped me." Elliot felt a swell of pride. "We'd be lucky to have you," he said. "Your experience will inspire others." Jordan's face lit up. "Thank you. That means a lot." The momentum continued to build, but with it came new challenges. As the Bridge Initiative expanded, so did the scrutiny. Critics questioned whether the program was sustainable or whether its success could be replicated on a larger scale. Elliot knew the questions were valid, but they also fueled his determination to prove the doubters wrong. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Elliot received a call from a familiar voice. It was Ethan Callaway, the CEO of the airline where Elliot's journey had begun. "Elliot," Callaway said, his tone warm, "I saw the feature on the Bridge Initiative. I have to say, it's incredible what you've accomplished." "Thank you, Ethan," Elliot replied. "It's been a team effort." "I've been thinking," Callaway continued. "We'd like to partner with the Bridge Initiative. We could sponsor workshops, provide funding, and offer mentorship opportunities through our organization. It's the least we can do after what happened." Elliot paused, the irony of the moment not lost on him. The same company that had been the setting for his humiliation was now offering to support the program born from it. He knew the offer was genuine, but he also understood the importance of holding them accountable. "I appreciate the offer," Elliot said, "but if we're going to work together, it has to be more than just a gesture. I want to see real change in your company, better training, better hiring practices, and a commitment to addressing bias." Callaway didn't hesitate. "You have my word. Let's make it happen." The partnership with the airline brought new resources and visibility to the Bridge Initiative, further cementing its reputation as a national force for good. But for Elliot, the true measure of their success wasn't in the headlines or the sponsorships, it was in the lives they were changing. At the next mentorship event, he watched as Jordan led a workshop on leadership skills, his confidence shining as he guided a group of students through exercises and discussions. Nearby, Emily worked with a smaller group, her vulnerability and honesty creating a safe space for students to share their experiences. Elliot stood at the back of the room, his heart full as he observed the scene. The torn ticket in his desk drawer had once represented pain and exclusion, but now it felt like a symbol of something much greater, a reminder that even the smallest ripples could grow into waves. As the workshop ended and students began to file out, Abby approached Elliot, her expression triumphant. "Looks like we're making waves," she said. Elliot smiled, the weight of the moment settling over him. "We're just getting started." The wave had begun, and Elliot knew it would continue to grow, carrying with it the hope, resilience, and determination of everyone it touched. And for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that real, lasting change was within reach. The Denver Convention Center buzzed with anticipation as Elliot Marshall stood backstage, reviewing his notes one final time. The room beyond was packed with hundreds of people, students, educators, business leaders, and community organizers, all gathered for the Bridge Initiative's first national summit. What had started as a single mentorship program had grown into a nationwide movement, and this summit was both a celebration and a call to action. Abby Taylor stood beside him, her clipboard tucked under one arm, a bright smile lighting up her face. "This is it," she said. "All the hard work, all the late nights, it's led to this moment." Elliot nodded, a mix of pride and nerves stirring within him. "It's hard to believe how far we've come." "You should be proud," Abby said. "This is your vision come to life." "It's our vision," Elliot corrected. "None of this would have happened without you, or Emily, or the students who believed in us." Abby squeezed his shoulder. "Go show them why it's worth believing." When Elliot stepped onto the stage, the applause was immediate and thunderous. He took a moment to let the energy of the room wash over him before beginning. "Thank you all for being here today," he said, his voice calm but strong. "When I first started the Bridge Initiative, I didn't imagine it would grow into what we see today. I didn't imagine standing here, in a room filled with people who believe in the power of mentorship, resilience, and connection." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the audience. But this journey didn't start with a program. It started with a moment of bias and exclusion that could have ended in frustration and silence. Instead, it became the spark for something greater. Elliot shared the story of the torn ticket, the humiliation he had felt at the airport, and the unexpected kindness of Abby Taylor, who had spoken up when others remained silent. He spoke about the lessons he had learned, not just from his own experiences, but from the students and mentors who had joined the Bridge Initiative. "This program isn't about erasing challenges," he said. "It's about facing them together. It's about giving people the tools to break down barriers and the courage to build something better. Every act of mentorship, every moment of kindness, it all matters. And it all starts with showing up." The applause that followed was louder, filled with genuine enthusiasm. As Elliot stepped back, Abby took the stage to introduce the next speakers, her voice brimming with energy. The day unfolded with workshops, panels, and breakout sessions. Jordan led a workshop on leadership for young professionals, sharing his own journey from uncertainty to confidence. Emily Carson hosted a session on addressing implicit bias, her honesty and vulnerability creating an open dialogue that resonated deeply with attendees. During a lunch break, Elliot wandered the convention hall, observing the vibrant conversations taking place at every table. He spotted Jordan speaking with a group of students, his hands gesturing animatedly as he shared advice. Nearby, Emily sat with a mentor, discussing how to adapt her workshops for a corporate setting. Abby joined him, a plate of food balanced precariously on her clipboard. "It's amazing, isn't it?" she said, gesturing to the room. "All these people, all these connections, this is what change looks like." Elliot nodded, his chest swelling with pride. "It's bigger than I ever imagined." "That's because you didn't just build a program," Abby said. "You built a movement." That evening, as the summit wound down, the attendees gathered for a final keynote session. The lights dimmed, and a video began to play, showcasing the impact of the Bridge Initiative. The screen filled with stories of students who had found their voices, mentors who had rediscovered their purpose, and communities that had come together to create opportunities for all. When the video ended, Elliot returned to the stage, his expression thoughtful. "The work we've done is only the beginning," he said. "The challenges we face, bias, exclusion, inequality, they're not going to disappear overnight. But every step we take, every bridge we build, brings us closer to the world we want to see." He paused, his voice softening. "Change doesn't happen because of one person. It happens because of all of us working together, believing in each other, and refusing to give up. This movement belongs to every person in this room and every life we touch." The audience rose to their feet, their applause filling the room with a sense of unity and hope. As Elliot stood there, he felt the weight of the journey settle over him, not as a burden, but as a reminder of how far they had come. Later that night, as the convention center emptied, Elliot found himself sitting alone on the stage, the torn ticket resting in his hand. He had carried it with him, a symbol of where it all began. Now it felt less like a reminder of pain and more like a testament to resilience and transformation. Emily approached, her footsteps echoing in the quiet space. "I thought you'd be gone by now," she said, sitting beside him. Elliot held up the ticket. "Just taking a moment to reflect." She nodded, her gaze following his. "It's incredible, isn't it? How something so small can lead to something so big." "It is," Elliot said. "But it's not just the ticket. It's the people, the ones who stood up, the ones who believed, the ones who refused to let it end there." Emily smiled. "You've built something that's going to outlast all of us." Elliot turned the ticket over in his hands, his expression thoughtful. "I hope so. But it's not just about me. It's about everyone who's willing to keep building." As Elliot left the convention center, the city lights shimmered against the night sky. The summit had been a success, but the work was far from over. The Bridge Initiative had grown into something extraordinary, but its true strength lay in the people who carried its mission forward. The torn ticket had been the beginning of the journey, but the ripples it created had become a wave of kindness, resilience, and hope. And as Elliot walked into the night, he knew that the wave would continue to grow, reaching further than he had ever imagined. Elliot Marshall's story reminds us that even the smallest moments can spark incredible change. What began with a torn ticket grew into a nationwide movement, proving that kindness, resilience, and determination can turn pain into purpose. His journey is a testament to the power of connection and the ripple effect of standing up for what's right. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on how you can create ripples in your own life. Every act of courage, every moment of compassion, has the potential to transform not just your life, but the lives of those around you. Thank you for joining us on this inspiring journey. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of perseverance, hope, and the power of human connection, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who might need a reminder of the incredible strength we all carry within. Together, we can keep building bridges and creating a better world. See you in the next story.